It's remake time, and today we're examining the beetle with the horn heard around the world, Heracross. First introduced in Generation 2, Heracross was tough to find in the Gold and Silver games, as players had to headbutt trees and hope they get lucky. In the anime, Ash had a Heracross which carried him through many difficult battles, including the climactic one against Gary. Heracross performed a stunning feat of anime logic in that fight by beating away Magmar's fire with its wings. Today we'll be examining if Heracross was similarly effective in the competitive scene, and so we asked, how great was Heracross actually? And in this video, we'll be going over these competitive formats. Despite its massive base 125 attack stat and brutally powerful stab Megahorn, Heracross took on more of a supporting role in its debut generation, and it was quite excellent at it. It did hit many Pokemon incredibly hard, but the problem was that offensive teams packed Zapdos and defensive teams packed Skarmory, neither of which Heracross was going to get by, as the lack of true rock coverage or fighting stab respectively really hurt it. Now Heracross could potentially sweep if those Pokemon were dealt with, but that was not its primary value, more of an added bonus. Its primary value lay in its defensive profile, which let it stave off several threats which were otherwise massively difficult to manage, most notably Nidoking, as well as being immensely helpful against Machamp, Marowak, and even Gengar. It could even be used to stave off Cursed Steelix nicely, thus protecting a teammate like Skarmory from getting exploded on. And this was but one example of how Heracross assists its defensive team in dividing and conquering an opposing offensive team's attempts to concentrate their wall-breaking efforts on one particular target. They would often be unable to reach that target because Heracross would stand in their way. Another example was Heracross walling Gengar, which wanted to lure in and blow up on Raikou. If Gengar blew up Heracross, fine, but then Raikou would still be around to wall Gengar's teammate Zapdos, meaning Heracross accomplished this job. This trait was as rare as Heracross was efficient in executing it, and it was thus an integral member of many balanced teams' rock-solid defensive cores. Being forced to rest wasn't even a detriment for it, as it would pretty much always call a useful move from Sleep Talk. Heracross certainly wasn't just a wall though it struggled to actually rip through teams on its own by virtue of how common its walls were. This didn't mean it didn't slash through a significant portion of the tier, especially with its solid speed for the tier. Its Megahorn absolutely tore through common bug-weak Pokemon like Tyranitar, Exeggutor, and Umbreon. And neutral Pokemon weren't safe either. The likes of Snorlax and Raikou got hit really hard. Even several common resists like the Nidochimp Gar Heracross covered, or even something like Misdreavus didn't exactly work as resists either. After all, Heracross tended to check them, and Megahorn still chunked them quite decently. And even Gengar's quad resist and S-Toss immunity didn't help when it wasn't healing, unlike Heracross, and getting chipped by spikes. The extent of Heracross's offense wasn't just being a Megahorn machine either. Other sturdier Megahorn resists like Forretress and Steelix got worn down by Seismic Toss in conjunction with spikes too. As a result, the only really safe answers were Zapdos and Skarmory. Those of course were big things to be walled by. However, Heracross and its team would actually take advantage of how it was walled by them. The most classic examples was against stall teams, where Heracross would force in Skarmory and repeatedly Seismic Toss it, eventually forcing Skarm to rest. This was excellent in facilitating its teammate, the ferocious belly drum Snorlax. S-Toss Heracross was one of the Drumlax's favorite partners for this reason. But what about more offensive teams with Zapdos? Well, same deal. It took a little while thanks to Zapdos' larger HP stat, but eventually Heracross would force a rest, which gave Snorlax an easier time switching into and threatening out Zapdos so it could set up a belly drum, something it couldn't do in the face of thunders freely fired off while Zapdos was awake. Unlike against Skarmory, Heracross could also stay in on Zapdos if it felt like it, thanks to its great special defense. For perspective, Heracross easily lived a Mewtwo Psychic, so with Zapdos just about never running Drill Peck, Heracross was apt at baiting the third into wasting Thunder PP against it, providing another understated yet valuable trait Heracross brought to its team. This made its teammate Drumlax even more threatening by really forcing the issue of the timer Zapdos' Thunder PP were on. Drumlax wasn't the only Pokemon that could take advantage of S-Toss Hera either. Something like the dangerous Curse Rhydon was similarly appreciative. Now of course Heracross could act as a dangerous late game sweeper with Curse too. It wasn't an automatic replacement for S-Toss, as it did lose some defensive utility with it. For example, calling Curse in its sleep and slowing itself down could potentially impede its ability to check the likes of Marowak and Machamp, while also becoming totally walled by Steelix and making itself susceptible to Exeggutor. It Additionally, as it was no longer luring in Zapdos and Skarm and weakening them with S-Toss, and was instead permanently walled, its team had to be built to account for that. However, Heracross was still an effective, valuable roadblock to the likes of Nidoking and Gengar, and it came with the benefit of cleaning up hard with the right support, which wasn't difficult to find. Most commonly, Cursed Self-Destruct Snorlax was partnered with it, as it was the best lure in the game for destroying Skarmory and would thus clear a path for Heracross to wreak destruction against Stall, while Exeggutor was another common partner to bait in and ruin opposing offensive teams as Zapdos. Once Hera got going, it was seriously tough to stop. However, though Curse could be threatening, the Seismic Toss set was the variant that most showcased Heracross's place in GSC, as it allowed Heracross to most efficiently carry out the defensive-offensive roles that it was so unique and valuable in executing. It also theoretically could use reversal sets, but those were incredibly unreliable offensively and utterly worthless defensively, so they were relegated to gimmick territory, the complete opposite of its standard sets. And so Heracross was an understated but outstanding pillar of GSC balance teams. It was often overlooked until it appeared in battle and did its thing. And it was an excellent debut generation. Generation 2's dearth of options meant Heracross was held back from its enormous potential as a physical attacker. Then Generation 3 came around and did everything possible to correct that mistake. First, Heracross received actual fighting type stab, which was huge. Brick Break was solid and consistent, even bringing a screen-shattering effect with it, as if Heracross wasn't enough of a threat to defense already. But it could also go big with the enormous power of Focus Punch. What about the flying types that threatened it though? Well, have no fear, because Heracross learned Rock Slide now and could smack them really good. It didn't end there though. No, far from it, as the already powerful Heracross could now strengthen itself to superlative levels with either the immediacy of Choice Band or the game-ending potential of Swords Dance. Heracross was effectively even stronger with Generation 3's shift to the EV system, which meant not everything had its bulk automatically maxed out anymore. Plus, with the addition of Select Berry, Heracross could even make itself faster than its would-be revenge killers. Select Berry, of course, worked when Heracross was at low HP, just like one of its excellent new abilities, Swarm, which made its Mega Horn an even more efficient kill button. Heracross wasn't relegated to an ability useful only at low HP either, but that would have been fine if it had been the case, but most of the time it ran Guts, which ensured that if the opponent dared status it, that all its attacks would become even stronger, thus making it even more insanely difficult to deal with. Now, the one downside Heracross experienced in Generation 3 was the complete loss of defensive utility. The most it could say was that it was a physical attacker that didn't fear water types. However, for something this destructive, who cares? Heracross was instantly one of Advance's most ferocious attacker. It was nigh uncounterable. It was a Pokemon that you had to play around rather than answer safely, and if the Heracross user played well, was pretty much impossible to do so without at least sustaining serious damage, if not one KO minimum. Sure, some checks like Salamence and Gengar were better than others, but they weren't exactly foolproof, not just because of Heracross's coverage moves, which were excellent, but because of its raw, immediate power with Choice Band, which was just ridiculous at times. It meant it didn't need to predict switch-ins and use coverage moves because Mega Horn was just so appallingly powerful, ripping through even Ments and Zapdos that thought they could withstand it, while ensuring neutral targets like Swampert and Suicune got absolutely shattered. Skarmory wasn't even a good check anymore, as it was potentially one-hit KO'd by Choice Band Focus Punch. It's not like Heracross needed Choice Band Focus Punch to invalidate Skarm as a check though. There were several ways it could do that, but the most straightforward way was to partner with Magneton, as it often did, to make Skarmory a complete non-factor. Even being prone to Dugtrio didn't stop Heracross. Not only did this not necessarily work against variants with Sub and or Select Berry, but a well-built Heracross team would have many ways of punishing a Dug Trap. For example, giving a partner Tyranitar or Salamence a free Dragon Dance. On certain teams, Heracross even partnered with Dugtrio itself for one of the most unique strategies in Advance. When the opposing Dugtrio locked into Aerial Ace to remove Heracross, that allowed Heracross's partner Dugtrio to come in and remove the opposing Dugtrio. This was absolutely incredible for enabling Heracross's Dugtrio weak teammates like Metagross and Tyranitar. Heracross wasn't the fastest thing in the world, but its speed tier was still solid. In fact, its speed stat was one of the most important numbers in the tier, even being metagame defining, since many potential faster Pokemon like Salamence, Zapdos, and Moltres specifically EV themselves to outrun it. They would have absolutely loved to have gone slower, since there wasn't much else in that Heracross speed tier, but they couldn't or Heracross would crush them. With this solid speed, and its great natural bulk, in addition to useful typing for a physical attacker, boasting a resistance to earthquake and a neutrality to water and ice, Heracross would always find some opportunity to wreak havoc on a game-to-game basis. It was effective at forcing huge damage on the opponent, not just in advantageous matchups, but even in seemingly disadvantageous ones, notably being able to take psychics from the likes of offensive Jirachi and Celebi. And that was just against fast-paced teams. Against slow defensive teams, well, there was nothing they hated facing more than Heracross. It absolutely destroyed them. It had all the opportunity in the world against Blissey, Claydol, slow Celebis, bulky Suicunes. They were just torn apart by it. Heracross was the single biggest argument against running an all-out stall team. You thought you had everything walled, then Heracross showed up and single-handedly ruined you. Even obscure, supposedly dedicated counters like Weezing, Dusclops, and bulky Salamence could stop it once, but in the long run, Heracross would bowl them over. They were too slow and weak to stand up to it once it had gotten some easily accumulated chip damage on them, and then chose to boost up and go for game. Heracross would have been a solid Pokemon even if it was forced to go itemless and use no move other than Mega Horn, but its set versatility made it even better, making it even more difficult to handle. And of course, no matter which set it chose, it was always going to be threatening by virtue of how badly Mega Horn ripped the tier up. We've already mentioned the almost peerless instant brutality of the Choice Band set. The Substitute Swarm Select Swords Dance set was one of the tier's most dangerous cleaners, sure. Dropping to low HP was risky on a sand-affected Pokemon in the Tyranitar tier, but that could be assuaged through weather-changing teammates, and the rewards were worthwhile. As one setup, Heracross's cleaning prowess was nigh unmatched, outrunning and one-hit KOing nearly everything. There was something to be said for the insanity that was one-hit KOing Metagross with a neutral physical attack, even if boosted. Heracross could also Swords Dance without the sub, and without the select, it became even more threatening when it could fit Fighting Stab onto its set, meaning it didn't require Skarm removing support, as it could just do so itself. While Heracross also loved the longevity of leftovers, meaning teams couldn't just try to outlast it in Sandstorm, especially in conjunction with Protect. When Skarmory started shifting away from running Drill Peck in favor of Protect and Toxic, Swords Dance Focus Punch Heracross appeared and punched it like nothing else. Heracross didn't even have to boost at all. It could simply use an all-out attacking set, maximizing his coverage with Hidden Power Ghost for Gengar. It could dip into other items too. Lum or Chestleberry allowed it to counteract sleep moves, with the latter being useful for allowing it to stop sleep while still making use of Guts if being hit by other status. Alternatively,